what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, and you're listening to MMA Latest News.com.
It's time to roll, baby.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to MMA Latest. We're here for the Cage Warriors 116 preview, of course. We are finishing the trilogy tonight on what is a phenomenal night for MMA, of course. We've got Bellator Milan for the first European series back since COVID-19, of course. And, of course, we finished the night with UFC 253. But for Cage Warriors, it's the last. We've gone back to back now, and the first two nights have been absolutely phenomenal. First night, Luke Shanks did become the flyweight title, or flyweight champion, should I say, after defeating Samir Thadin. Last night was an absolute barn burner. 5 fights, 4 of them didn't even get past the first round, with Jack Cartwright in that main event, of course, with the arm triangle submission defeating Gerardo Fanny, of course. But, you know, an incredible fight, and obviously I think Jack Cartwright probably has now booked his ticket to the UFC, of course. You know, with Fight Island coming up, or Fight Island starting tonight, there could be opportunities for him there, especially going into November and December, of course, in Vegas. It'll be interesting to see what's next for Cartwright, but of course, he had a phenomenal night last night, and as did many of the fighters last night. As I mentioned, four fights in a row didn't make it out of that first round. Obviously, James Webb defeated Craig White, who did later on, of course, leave his gloves in the cage and retired and announced his retirement. Jack Grant against Yassine Belhaj, a phenomenal submission win again for him. Wesley Meyer knocked out Adam Wilson very late into the first round, right on the buzzer, I believe it was. And Adam Wilson, made some, he thought he got poked in the eye, but it was a very much a legal shot. And of course, opening the card was Ian Gary against George McManus, which only went the second round, and that was a phenomenal fight. Ian Gary is gonna pull up some trees, and got a lot of eyes on him. I think Ariel Helwani put a tweet out saying watch out for this guy, he's going to be in the UFC one day. And I think he is. He is a welterweight, and you can make the loose connections that he almost reminds you of the Wonder Boy, a style bender, someone like that, someone who's incredible managing distance. He can be a little flat-footed, but he can pick his shots tremendously, and he obviously backs himself with the power that he has, and he moved to 4-0, and he looked phenomenal last night. And obviously Irish MMA at the moment is very much, it's very much growing again. We had it's on the come up again, and hopefully we see in the UFC, where we haven't got as many of the Irish talents in at the moment. We're going to see them, hopefully get promoted up there from Cage Warriors. And I think Ian Gary and someone fighting tonight, Paul Hughes, is two there that is on their way to the UFC, and probably next year, if not the year after at least, they can see themselves in that top organisation. But the Cage Warriors 115, a phenomenal event. The pacing of it was mesmerising. I think it started at 9 and was done by about 11. That's how quick the fights lasted. And it's been an incredible trilogy. It's just a shame that there's been no fans in there, because those finishes last night would have got the BEC Arena rocking. But tonight we are back. I mentioned it before. This is the dessert of the night, of course. Mason Jones versus Adam Proctor for the vacant welterweight title. Of course, Mason Jones being the lightweight champion. He won that at Cage Warriors 1-3, defeating Jake McColgan, of course, in the first round. That title was also vacant on the night. So he's coming in a very hot streak at the moment, of course. If he wins tonight, he'll become only the third fighter to do it in Cage Warriors history, matching Conor McGregor and, of course, Dan Hardy, who both had very successful careers in the UFC. And we know what Conor McGregor's done since that title win, of course. He became champ in the UFC, the first ever to do it simultaneously, of course. So yes, obviously Adam Proctor is no easy slouch. He's coming in here, again on his hot streak himself. He's won 7 of his last fights, of course. He's on a fantastic streak. He was at that Cage Warriors 112 event where I was at, and he put a fantastic decision win against Madar Slaminas, of course. He is 12-1, but this is a fantastic opportunity for him. Of course, Ross Houston was the former champion, but he signed for Bellator. He's making his debut in just under a week, or just over a week, at Bellator Paris against MVP. So we see where these fights go. Of course, Nicholas Dalby from that division and Reese McKee both returned to the UFC at Fight Island, of course. So the winner tonight could be expecting themselves in the UFC again next year, or a win tonight would be phenomenal for them. Both of them are very talented individuals. Of course, you've got SBG South Shields there. We saw what SBG Manchester did last night, and the main event, it's going to be an absolute cracker. It's going to be one that you're not going to want to miss. You're going to be wanting to sign up to UFC Fight Pass if you haven't already. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button for MMA Latest. Of course, we're closing in on 10k now, but this. Yeah, this is an incredible fight. Both of them are going to bring it. It's going to be interesting to see what Mason Jones does now. He's moved up 15 pounds up to welterweight from lightweight. Can he still perform having that extra weight on him? Adam Proctor's, he's been there for a little while now, so he's gonna really know that division and know if he's a lot stronger than Mason Jones. I'm sure we'll find out in the first couple of rounds. But again, we mentioned this yesterday. Welsh MMA is one that's bubbling away at the surface now. It's becoming a hotbed for mixed martial arts, with the likes of Jack Shaw, you've got, John Phillips, of course, in the UFC. Now, of course, Adam Proctor's last loss was against Aaron Khalid, who performed phenomenally well against Mick Stanton, of course, and you'd imagine, should Adam Proctor win tonight, or even Mason Jones, you'd imagine that Aaron Khalid will be next in line for that title. He put a phenomenal effort in and a phenomenal job against Mick Stanton, and, it feel confident should Adam Proctor win that belt tonight to make it 2-0 against him. I'm sure Adam Proctor, will be looking to get that one back against him. But also, if Mason Jones wins tonight, you could potentially see, an all Welsh headline for that welterweight title, and that would be phenomenal. Can you imagine a Cage Warriors Cardiff, I believe it was going to have this year, had it not been for COVID? That would be a phenomenal event. But we do move on to the co-main event, of course. It's Paul Hughes versus Aidan Stephen, the Irish against the Scottish, of course. Paul Hughes 5-0 against Stephen, who's 7-2-0. Of course, Hughes' last win was a phenomenal second round head kick finish against Yuri Panada at Cage Warriors 112. He is a real talent. He's still very young, still only 5-0, but Jesus, he's gonna be dangerous in that featherweight division. He's gonna be someone that everyone's gonna be keeping eyes on. If he gets a good win tonight again, he's finished his last 4 fights even. 5 fights even. Looking at his Tapology record here, he's on a 5-fight win streak, and he's got finishes in all of them, and in very much different outcomes. A couple of submissions here. His last one was a head kick. He's got knockout via punches on his record. So he could really be the real deal for featherweight. And we know what happened to Conor McGregor. He came in as a featherweight. Coming from Ireland. We know what way the standards are, and we know recently in terms of what Ireland have brought to the table for that mixed martial arts, they're very much up there with the top nations in terms of bringing through talent. And this is going to be incredible. Aidan Stevens got a tough job in his hand. He's won 5 of his last 6 bouts, with his last fight being a round 1 finish against Jack Collins at Cage Warriors 113. Now, of course, a lot of these fighters fought either on that Manchester card at Cage Warriors 112 or at Cage Warriors 113, which is of course supposed to be in London but got moved up to the BC Arena. So it'd be interesting because a couple of these, Aidan Stevens would have fought in an empty BSC arena, whereas Paul Hughes the week before would have had a full crowd. So it's going to be interesting to see how they adapt to that situation. Of course, it's going to be very much a similar sort of environment in terms of how you train in the gym. It's very quiet. You can probably hear the music. So it's going to be interesting to hear corners, of course, as well. But this one for me is one not to be slept on. This one for me, if Paul Hughes does get the win tonight, again, I don't think he's quite ready for the UFC. But again, he'd be on his way, and of course, he'd be on his way to a featherweight title shot, which would be phenomenal for him and for Ireland, of course. Now we move on to a lightweight bout between 2 Englishmen, Kieran Lister versus Tom Means. Of course, Kieran Lister 6-0-1, still undefeated, of course, getting a draw in one of his fights previously, but 6-4 for Tom Means, or Tom Means, perhaps. I think it's Means, but yeah, enough of the pronunciation lessons. Lister has a 2-fight win streak, while Tom, has lost 4 of his last 5 fights, most recently against Stephen Hooper, again at Cage Warriors 112. So this one is a big one for Tom Means. Of course, he's going to want to get back to winning ways, and we saw last night Craig White, who was on a 5-fight loss streak. He left his gloves in the cage, and he's had a phenomenal career and a long career as well, especially with Cage Warriors, and he's going to go down as Cage Warriors legend. But Tom Means, once you start hitting those lengthy loss streaks, it does become both detrimental on a mental side, I imagine, but also trying to book fights. Once you're on a 5-fight loss streak, it's very hard, and promoters, we see it, the allowance is usually 3. Once you start losing 3 on the rounds, we see the UFC and other organizations start to cut people from that point on. But Kieran Lister, he's gonna be a dangerous opponent for that lightweight division, of course. 6-0-1, He beat Johnny Brocklesby in his last fight at Almighty Fight Championship. So he hasn't been in the Cage Warriors aspect for that long. He was at Bellator Birmingham and Bellator Newcastle, so he's got that experience behind him, of course. But Tom Means, he's fought at Bellator London, fought a lot on the Cage Warriors circuit, of course. He did lose to Stephen Hooper in Manchester, as we said. Again, he's going to be one that it's the first time probably in a while that he's fought in front of no crowd. So this one's going to be a very interesting one, and it's going to be the two Englishmen going at it, and Mason Jones, that lightweight champion at the moment. I can't imagine these two get put into a title shot next, but a very impressive performance. We could see them become, their next fight be a number one contender spot, perhaps. So let us know in the comments what you think about that. Kieran Lister, Tom Means, Cage Warriors these past 3 nights has been phenomenal as well. So I'm sure these ones are going to be just as emphatic, and even though last night was a 5-fight card, we've got 7 fights on tonight, 2 prelims that is as well, 5-fight main card, of course. It's gonna be very impressive, and I'm excited for tonight. Of course, we now move on to, of course, Sam Creasy versus Nicholas LeBlanc. Of course, all week me and Quarter have been talking about the chances of the Cage Warriors Paris coming up. Of course, with Bellator Paris next week. Of course, we've got a lot of French fighters. We had 4 coming through this week, which would have made a very good main card. Unfortunately, Samir Fadin, of course, lost his title against Luke Shanks. Sam Creasy, of course, 11-3, so he's got a vast amount of experience against Nicholas LeBlanc, who comes in at 5-2. But we say that, having said that, Sam Creasy's last loss was in fact against Samir Fadin, of course, just lost his title only 2 nights ago. So a win here for him would be very impressive. It would be, a bounce back. We're looking for someone to for Luke Shanks to defend his title against. It'd probably be Jake Hadley, because he performed phenomenal on Thursday night as well. But should something, an injury to Jake Hadley, a quick turnaround perhaps, or he might want to go for Samir Fadin and get that opportunity to avenge that loss that he suffered at Cage Warriors 106, of course, and potentially then move on to face the champion in Luke Shanks. But before that, he beat Andy Young, of course, Conor Hignett, of course, who fought just recently this week. Of course, a lot of these names you would have seen in these trilogy events, of course. And it's a phenomenal the amount of fights that we've seen this weekend. We have had 2 come off the card this tonight for Cage Warriors 116 in terms of 2 positive COVID tests, of course. Nicholas LeBlanc is on a 3-fight win streak, having beaten James Williams at UK Fighting Championship 12 back in December. So he's on a bit of a hot streak himself. He hasn't been as active. He's only fought once in 2019, and then his last fight before that was 2018, and even before that 2016. So he's only fought 3 times in the last 4 years. So he's going to be a little rusty. Fadin fought twice last year, twice in 2018, and he's fought 6 times since Nicholas LeBlanc did fight. But it's going to be interesting. I think Sam Creasy is going to be one to watch here, and that 11-3 record that he has isn't one that you're going to want to miss. It isn't something you can be looking over too much. I think he might get the job done. I think Nicholas LeBlanc might have his hands a bit too full tonight, with all due credit. But we move on to the final main card fight, and that's Steve Ammable against Jordan Vucenic, I believe it is. He comes in this 14-7. That's a vast amount of experience on the featherweight. Steve Ammable, of course. Jordan Vucenic, of course, coming in at 5-1. So it is going to be a good cracking fight. Again, 2 English guys going head to head tonight in the main card opener. Perian Andre Goodwin was Steve's last fight. He did lose that. He's on a 2-fight loss streak at the moment. But looking at the records, Cage Warriors 1-1. One was against Mads Burnell, but Cage Warriors 1-1-3. I'd imagine that was a quick turnaround. More of the let's get in there. It's a card that at that point had almost fallen to pieces with it having to move the location. But before those 2 losses, he was on a 4-fight win streak. So he's a very talented individual, and we'd be expecting a good showing from him tonight. But Jordan Vucenic is on a 3-fight win streak himself. He's won at Battle Arena, Celtic Gladiator, and of course he made his Cage Warriors debut in his last fight back in October 2019 against Conman there. So, and he won that by decision. So again, this featherweight division has got a good cracking night and a good cracking event to open the card up with. It's going to be. I'm very excited. I was buzzing. I was the MMA festival could be for some a little bit too much, but Thursday night was perfect. We saw some upsets. Last night flew by with round 1 finishes here, there, and everywhere. And tonight, I think it's going to be the perfect setup for a tremendous night. You know, if you're in the UK, you're going to be starting at what, 7:30 p.m. and finishing about 6-7 a.m. with the two title fights at UFC 253. So it's going to be a busy day for everyone. But the prelims, it is opened by Joshua Onworthy against Leon Hill, another Irish guy making his professional debut in the welterweight division. And of course, you've got Carl McClurkin up against Christian Leroy Duncan in those two prelim headliners. Of course, that's a 185-pound matchup, so that's gonna be interesting as well. But we've got to give all the props to Cage Warriors here for putting this event on, even on Tuesday or Wednesday night when we had a number of pullouts. You know, they could have quite easily panicked almost, you could say, but they kept their calm, they kept their cool. They even lost some of their media and their backroom staff to the positive COVID tests. And you know, Graham Boylan, you have to give your credit to him and your respect to him as well. You know, we've seen what he's done with this. He wanted to, you know, with being on UFC Fight Pass, he was looking at different options in terms of a Fight Island aspect perhaps, but he came back with this Trilogy headline and act. And it's gonna be interesting to see what they close it out with, whether it is a more prominent return to a weekly basis or a fortnightly basis, perhaps, whether they come back in November, of course. But you know, there's gonna be some heavy heads on Monday morning. One, because of the weekend, but two, because of the matchmaking they're going to have to do in preparation for the future events, and potentially losing some of their talent to other organisations where we've seen, you know, Ross Houston making his Bellator debut, you know, Nicholas Dalby returned to the UFC, Reece McKee made his UFC debut. We're going to be seeing that with the likes of Jack Cartwright and potentially Mason Jones or Adam Proctor should they win tonight. I imagine they are one step closer, if not booking their ticket to the UFC. But yes, make sure to join us again tonight for the UFC 253 live show. Thank you for all the support this week. Again, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 10k. And of course, we will see you guys on the next video.